Members of the jury, you have heard the evidence and the arguments of counsel. It is now your duty to decide the facts from the evidence in this case and to apply the law to those facts. The law applicable to this case is stated in these instructions, and it is your duty to follow the instructions. You must consider these instructions as a whole. The plaintiff, John Doe, claims that the defendant, Sam Smith, was negligent and that this negligence was a proximate cause of his injuries. The defendant denies these claims and contends that John Doe was himself negligent and that his negligence was a proximate cause of his own injuries. Negligence is the failure to use ordinary care. Ordinary care is that degree of care that would be used by a reasonably prudent person under the same or similar circumstances. To establish negligence, the plaintiff must prove each of the following elements by a preponderance of the evidence. The defendant owed a duty to the plaintiff, that the defendant breached that duty, and that the defendant's breach of duty was a proximate cause of the plaintiff's injuries. The defendant, Sam Smith, had a duty to maintain their premises in a reasonably safe condition and to warn of any dangerous conditions that it knew or should have known about. A breach of duty occurs when a party fails to exercise ordinary care in fulfilling its duty. A proximate cause is a cause that, in a natural and continuous sequence, produces an event, and without which the event would not have occurred. The defendant contends that the plaintiff was himself negligent, and that this negligence contributed to his injuries. Contributory negligence is negligence on the part of the plaintiff that, combined with the negligence of the defendant, proximately caused the plaintiff's injuries. If you find that the plaintiff was negligent and that his negligence was a proximate cause of his injuries, then you must compare the negligence of the plaintiff to the negligence of the defendant. If you find that both the plaintiff and the defendant were negligent and that their combined negligence was a proximate cause of the plaintiff's injuries, you must determine the percentage of negligence attributable to each party. The total must equal 100%. If you find that the defendant was negligent and that this negligence was a proximate cause of the plaintiff's injuries, you must then consider the damages suffered by the plaintiff. Damages are the monetary compensation that the law awards to someone who has been injured by the negligence of another. The plaintiff claims the following damages: past and future medical expenses, past and future pain and suffering, past and future mental anguish, past and future loss of earning capacity, physical impairment, and disfigurement. The plaintiff has the burden of proving each type of damage by a preponderance of the evidence set forth before you. A preponderance of the evidence is the greater weight and degree of credibility. It's the quality of the evidence that must be considered, not the quantity. You must consider all of the evidence in light of these instructions and then render your verdict. If you find for the plaintiff, you will then consider and decide the amount therefore owed. If you find for the defendant, you will not consider damages. Your verdict must be unanimous. Remember that you are the sole judges of the credibility of the witnesses and the weight to be given their testimony. You are also the sole judges of the facts. You must perform this duty without bias or prejudice as to any party. The law does not permit you to be governed by sympathy, prejudice, or public opinion. Both the plaintiff and the defendant expect that you will carefully and impartially consider all of the evidence, follow the law as set forth in these instructions, and render a just and fair verdict. As you deliberate, you must consider the following additional instructions. You have been presented with various forms of evidence, including testimony and physical evidence. It is your duty to determine the credibility of each piece of evidence. You should consider the nature of the evidence, the manner in which it was presented, and the consistency with other pieces of evidence. You have heard testimony from experts in today's proceedings. You're not bound by their statements. Instead, you should consider each expert's knowledge, experience, the basis of their opinion, and the consistency of their testimony with other evidence in the case. During your deliberations, you should discuss the case with one another and attempt to reach an agreement. Each of you must decide the case for yourself here, but only after an impartial consideration of the evidence with your fellow jurors. In the course of your deliberations, do not hesitate to re-examine your own views and change your opinion if convinced it is erroneous. However, none of you should surrender your honest conviction as to the weight or effect of evidence solely because of the opinion of your fellow jurors, or for the mere purpose of returning a verdict. Good luck, everyone.